Harold Winters adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror of his 10-year-old sedan. Today was the day. After 53 years of driving sensible, practical cars, he was finally going to buy something special. Not flashy or over the top, but a car that made him smile when he saw it in the driveway. His wife Martha had always been the practical one. "Cars are for getting from point A to point B," she'd say whenever Harold lingered over car magazines. But Martha had been gone for 3 years now, and last month when Harold cleaned out the attic, he found a birthday card she'd given him 15 years ago. Inside she'd written, "When we pay off the house, you should get that sports car you're always talking about." Harold patted the envelope in his jacket pocket. $60,000 in cashier's checks. His nest egg was secure, his house was paid off, and his children were doing well. At 78, he figured he'd earned this. Luxury Motors gleamed in the morning sun, its showroom windows spotless and reflecting the perfect blue sky. Harold had done his research. They carried the model he wanted. A midnight blue coupe with leather seats and just enough power to feel exciting without being ridiculous. He walked through the entrance, the air conditioning a relief from the summer heat. The showroom was immaculate, polished floors, bright lights, and 5 beautiful cars arranged strategically throughout the space. A young man and woman in matching navy suits stood chatting by a desk. Another salesperson was showing a couple in their 30s a red convertible. Harold stood near the entrance, waiting to be acknowledged. He straightened his posture, something his father had taught him long ago. "Stand tall and they'll take you seriously," he could hear Dad saying. After a full minute, neither of the chatting salespeople looked his way. He cleared his throat and walked toward the midnight blue coupe that sat in the center of the showroom, the very car he'd researched for months. Harold circled it slowly, admiring the lines, the craftsmanship. He bent slightly to peek at the interior, careful not to touch the paint. "It's a beauty, isn't it?" he said to the young salesman who was now walking past him toward a couple who had just entered. "Sure is," the salesman said without stopping, hurrying to greet the younger customers. "Tom Baker, welcome to Luxury Motors," he announced loudly, extending his hand to the newcomers. Harold continued examining the car, opening the driver's side door to see the interior more closely. The leather smelled wonderful, and the dashboard was elegantly designed with just the right amount of technology. Not too complicated, but not outdated either. He lowered himself into the seat, his knees protesting slightly. The seat felt like it was made for him, supportive in all the right places. Harold placed his hands on the steering wheel and allowed himself a moment to imagine driving along the coast road, the one he and Martha used to take on Sunday drives. After a few minutes, he carefully got out and looked for someone to talk to about a test drive. The salespeople were all engaged with other customers. Harold walked to an unoccupied desk and waited patiently. 15 minutes passed. Harold checked his watch and decided to be more direct. He approached the young woman who had finally finished with her customers. "Excuse me, miss. I'm interested in the midnight blue coupe. I'd like some information and possibly a test drive." She looked up, seeming surprised to be addressed. "Oh, of course. Let me see if one of our sales associates is available." "Couldn't you help me?" Harold asked. "I'm actually the finance manager." "Let me find Rick for you. He knows all about that model." Harold returned to waiting by the blue coupe. Through the window, he saw the finance manager speaking to a tall man with gelled hair, who glanced at Harold and then continued his conversation with another customer. After another 10 minutes, Harold decided to look at the window sticker himself. The price was actually less than he'd budgeted for, which was a pleasant surprise. He took out his phone and made a few notes. Finally, almost 45 minutes after he'd entered the dealership, the tall salesman approached. "How can I help you today, sir?" he asked, his voice friendly but his eyes already looking past Harold to scan the showroom. "I'm interested in this model," Harold said, gesturing to the blue coupe. "I've done quite a bit of research and I think it's exactly what I'm looking for." "It's a beautiful machine," the salesman, Rick, according to his name tag, said. "Though it might be a bit much to handle. We have some very nice sedans with excellent safety features that might be more suitable." Harold felt a familiar tightening in his chest, not his heart, but his pride. "I've been driving for 60 years without an accident. I think I can handle it." Rick's smile remained fixed. Of course. It's just that this particular model has quite a bit of power. The insurance alone might be. I'm prepared for the costs." Harold interrupted, his voice firm but pleasant. "I'd like a test drive, please." Rick hesitated. "We typically require a credit check before test drives on our premium vehicles. Why don't we start with some of our other models to see what suits your needs?" Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder containing his pristine credit report, proof of insurance, and driver's license. "I came prepared. My credit score is 820, I have no debt, and as you can see, my driving record is clean." Rick looked surprised as he flipped through the documents. "Very thorough, Mr. Winters. Let me just check if we have a demo model available for a test drive. The showroom models typically stay on the floor." As Rick walked away, Harold noticed him stop to chat with another salesperson, both glancing back at him. He pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the car's details. Rick returned after several minutes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Winters. Our demo is currently out with another client. Perhaps you could come back tomorrow, or I'd be happy to show you our selection of practical luxury sedans that might better fit your lifestyle." Harold felt his enthusiasm deflating like an old balloon. He'd taken a taxi here, planned his entire day around this visit. "When will the demo be back?" Rick checked his watch with exaggerated care. "Hard to say. Could be an hour, could be longer. These things are unpredictable." Through the showroom window, Harold could see the identical model to the one he was interested in, parked in the lot with a dealer plate. It clearly wasn't out with another client. "What about that one?" Harold pointed. "Oh, that one's being prepped for a customer who's coming in this afternoon," Rick said smoothly. "Actually, that particular client is upgrading from the same model. Says the acceleration is a bit too jumpy for his taste. That's why I thought a nice sedan might be." "I see." Harold interrupted, his voice quiet now. He looked around the showroom again, noting how the salespeople were eagerly attending to younger customers. A man perhaps half his age was being handed keys for a test drive in a vehicle much more powerful than the one Harold was interested in. No folder of documents had been requested. Harold carefully returned his paperwork to his jacket pocket. "Thank you for your time," he said, extending his hand. Rick shook it quickly, already turning toward a new group of customers entering the showroom. "Feel free to come back anytime, or maybe bring your son or daughter with you next time. Always good to have a second opinion." The comment stung more than it should have. Harold's son lived across the country, and his daughter was traveling abroad for work. Not that he needed their help to buy a car. Outside in the heat again, Harold pulled out his phone to call a taxi. As he waited, he watched a young couple exit the dealership. Excitement clear on their faces as Rick walked them to the very car in the lot that was supposedly being prepped for a customer. The taxi arrived 15 minutes later. "Where to?" the driver asked. Harold hesitated. He'd planned to go to his favorite lunch spot to celebrate. Instead, he gave the driver his home address. "Car shopping?" the driver asked, noticing the luxury motor sign. "Just looking," Harold replied, staring out the window as they pulled away. At home, Harold hung his jacket in the closet. He noticed Martha's handwriting on the card again. "You deserve something special." He sat in his old armchair, the excitement of the morning faded into a familiar disappointment. It wasn't about the car anymore. It was about being invisible, being dismissed. Harold picked up a framed photo from the side table, himself at age 60, receiving an award for his engineering work on bridge safety systems that had been implemented across the country. Systems that had saved countless lives, including perhaps some of those young salespeople who couldn't be bothered to take him seriously. His gaze drifted to his desk, where his laptop sat closed. Harold had never been one to accept defeat easily. In his career, obstacles were just problems waiting for solutions. "This isn't over," he murmured to Martha's photo. "Not by a long shot." He opened his laptop and began to type. Harold spent the next few days trying to shake off the disappointment from luxury motors. He puttered around his garden, fixed the squeaky hinge on the back gate, and called his daughter in London. He didn't mention the car dealership incident. What would be the point? She'd either get upset on his behalf or, worse, suggest that maybe he was too old for a sports car. On Wednesday afternoon, Harold walked to his community center for his weekly investment club meeting. He'd joined 6 years ago, more for the company than the investment advice. After Martha passed, he'd needed reasons to get dressed and leave the house. The club met in a bright room with large windows overlooking a small park. A dozen or so retirees gathered around a long table, most in their 60s and 70s, with a few like Harold pushing 80. They were discussing dividend stocks when Harold slipped into an empty chair. "Sorry I'm late," he whispered to Gloria, a former bank manager who ran the meetings with cheerful efficiency. "Just in time for coffee," she whispered back, sliding a steaming mug toward him. After the formal discussion ended, the group broke into smaller conversations. Harold found himself sitting with Frank, a retired accountant, and Diane, who had owned a chain of hardware stores before selling them to her employees through a stock ownership plan. "So what's new with you, Harold?" Frank asked, dunking a cookie into his coffee. "Did you ever get that sports car you've been talking about?" Harold sighed, surprised by how much the memory still stung. "I tried. Went to Luxury Motors on Saturday with cash ready to go. Couldn't even get a test drive." "Luxury Motors?" Diane perked up. "The one over on Harper Avenue?" Harold nodded. "That place is in trouble," she said, leaning forward. "My nephew works for the bank that holds their floor plan financing. Says they're behind on payments." "Floor plan financing?" Harold asked. Frank jumped in. "It's how dealerships finance their inventory. The bank pays the manufacturer for the cars, and the dealership repays the bank when they sell each vehicle." "Exactly," Diane said. "And apparently Luxury Motors is struggling to move enough units to keep up with their obligations. They're not part of the original local chain anymore either. Some big corporation bought them out a few years back." Harold thought about the dismissive salespeople. They weren't acting like a business desperate for sales. "That's the strange part," Diane said. "From what my nephew says, they should be rolling out the red carpet for anyone who walks through the door, especially someone with cash in hand." After the meeting, Harold found himself walking home with Paul, a fellow widower who had been a business reporter before retirement. Harold mentioned the dealership situation. "Luxury Motors. They're owned by Platinum Automotive Group now," Paul said. "I did a story on them years ago. They've been buying up family-owned dealerships across the country. Not always in the most ethical ways either." "What do you mean?" Harold asked. Paul stopped walking, his expression serious. "They have a pattern. Buy a controlling interest in a successful family dealership. Install their management team. Cut corners on customer service, boost short-term profits, and then either sell the location or use it to secure financing for more acquisitions. That sounds like a recipe for running a good business into the ground," Harold said. "Exactly. But the original owners often don't realize what's happening until it's too late. By the time the business starts failing, Platinum has already extracted what they wanted." That night, Harold couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Luxury Motors, about the young salespeople who couldn't be bothered with an old man, about Platinum Automotive Group and their business practices. At 3 a.m, he got up and made a cup of tea. Sitting at his kitchen table, Harold opened his laptop. His engineering career had taught him to research thoroughly before making any decisions. He typed Platinum Automotive Group into the search bar. The results were illuminating. Platinum had started 15 years ago and grown rapidly by acquiring established dealerships in mid-sized cities. They followed a clear pattern: purchase controlling interest, promise to maintain the family business atmosphere, then gradually replace staff and cut costs. Several lawsuits had been filed by former dealership owners, though most were settled out of court. Harold dug deeper. Financial news sites revealed that Platinum was heavily leveraged, using each acquisition as collateral for the next. Their growth depended on maintaining the appearance of success. At dawn, Harold was still researching. He found an article about Luxury Motors from 5 years ago, celebrating its 30th anniversary. There was a photo of the owner, Bill Thompson, standing proudly in front of the dealership with his family, including his son Robert. Harold squinted at the photo. Robert Thompson looked familiar. Then it hit him. The manager at Luxury Motors, the one who had brushed him off, was Robert Thompson. The son of the original owner was still working at the dealership his family had built, but no longer as the owner, over breakfast. Harold made a phone call to an old colleague, Jerry, who had gone into finance after leaving engineering. "Jerry, it's Harold Winters. I need some advice on corporate structures and financing." After explaining what he'd learned about Platinum, Harold asked, "Is there a way to tell how stable they really are?" Jerry's voice grew serious. "Companies like that are often houses of cards, Harold. They look impressive until something disrupts their cash flow or credit. Then the whole thing can collapse quickly. And what happens to the individual dealerships if Platinum fails? Depends on the legal structure. Some might revert to previous owners if there were specific terms in the acquisition. Others would be liquidated to pay creditors. Harold thanked Jerry and hung up, his mind working on a new problem, one that felt familiar and challenging in a way he hadn't experienced since retirement. That afternoon, Harold returned to the community center, this time for the computer class he occasionally attended. The instructor, a patient woman in her 40s, helped seniors navigate technology. Today, Harold had specific questions. "I'd like to learn more about researching public records for business ownership," he told her, "and maybe how to track corporate filings." She seemed surprised but happy to help. "That's more advanced than our usual email and Facebook tutorials, but I can certainly show you some resources." For the next 2 hours, Harold learned how to access Secretary of State business filings, property records, and corporate ownership databases. He took careful notes, reminding himself of the methodical approach that had served him well throughout his career. Walking home, Harold stopped at a bench in the park. It was where he often sat with Martha on Sunday afternoons, watching families with young children play and talking about their own children when they were small. He missed her practical wisdom and straightforward advice. "What would you think of all this, Martha?" he murmured. As if in answer, he remembered something she used to say whenever their children faced unfairness. "Don't get mad, get smart." That evening, Harold called his investment club friends one by one. Gloria, Frank, Diane, Paul, and 3 others agreed to meet at his house the following night. They gathered in Harold's living room, curious about the urgent invitation. Harold had prepared a simple presentation using the skills he'd learned in the computer class. "I believe I found an interesting investment opportunity," he began, clicking to a slide showing Luxury Motors and Platinum Automotive Group's logos. "But more importantly, I found a chance to right a wrong." For the next hour, Harold laid out what he'd discovered: Platinum's precarious financial position, their pattern of acquiring and then diminishing family businesses, and the specific situation with Luxury Motors. "The Thompson family built that dealership from nothing," Harold explained. "Now the son works as a manager in his own family's business, watching it be run into the ground by corporate raiders." "That's a shame," Gloria said. "But what can we do about it?" Harold smiled, feeling more alive than he had in years. "I have an idea, but I'll need your help." He clicked to a slide titled Operation Turnaround. "Individually, we're just retirees who get ignored. Together, we have knowledge, connections, and significant financial resources. Platinum has a weakness. They're overextended and vulnerable to any disruption in their cash flow." Frank leaned forward. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Harold nodded. "I'm suggesting we form an investment group. We use our combined resources to gain leverage over Platinum, focusing specifically on the Luxury Motors location." "And then what?" Diane asked. "Then," Harold said, his eyes bright with purpose, "we remind them that ignoring people with experience and resources is a very expensive mistake." The room was silent for a moment. Then Paul started laughing. "Harold Winters, you old fox. You're not looking to buy a car anymore, are you? You're looking to buy the whole dealership." Harold shrugged modestly. "Not exactly. But I'm looking to teach some young folks a valuable lesson about respecting their elders." One by one, his friends began to nod, smiles spreading across their faces. "I'm in," Gloria said, raising her coffee mug in a toast. "To Operation Turnaround?" "To Operation Turnaround," they echoed. As his friends discussed next steps, Harold gazed at Martha's photo on the mantel. He could almost see her smiling her approval. "Don't get mad, get smart," he whispered. "I'm working on it, dear. I'm working on it." Harold's dining room had transformed into a command center. What began as a simple meeting of retirees had evolved into daily strategy sessions. The large oak table was covered with printouts, financial reports, and legal documents. 3 laptops sat open, screens glowing with spreadsheets and corporate filings. "Platinum's corporate structure is more complicated than I thought," Gloria said, adjusting her reading glasses as she studied a diagram Harold had created. "They've set up each dealership as a separate LLC, but they're all connected through a web of holding companies." Frank nodded, tapping a calculator. "Classic strategy to limit liability. If one dealership fails, it doesn't bring down the others. It also makes it harder to see who really owns what," Harold added. He'd spent the past 2 weeks learning more about corporate finance than he'd ever known during his engineering career. "But that works both ways. It means we can target luxury motors specifically without having to take on the entire Platinum Group. Paul, who had been typing furiously on his laptop, looked up with a grin. I just heard back from my contact at the Business Journal. He didn't want to go on record, but he confirmed that Platinum is over-leveraged. They've been using the same assets as collateral for multiple loans. Diane whistled. That's playing with fire. More importantly, Paul continued, he says the Thompson family still owns 30% of Luxury Motors. They were forced to sell controlling interest to Platinum during the economic downturn, but they held onto a minority stake. Harold felt a surge of satisfaction. This confirmed his theory that Robert Thompson, the manager who had dismissed him, was indeed the son of the original owner, now working in a reduced capacity at the family business. 30% isn't enough to make decisions, Gloria pointed out. True, Harold agreed, but it might be enough to create a tipping point if we can acquire enough additional shares. The group had pooled their resources and set aside a substantial investment fund. Between them, they had nearly $2 million they were willing to commit to Operation Turnaround. It wasn't enough to buy out Platinum entirely, but it might be enough to gain significant influence. I've been thinking, Harold said slowly. We don't need to own Luxury Motors outright. We just need enough leverage to influence Platinum's decisions about that location. What kind of leverage? Frank asked. Financial, legal, and public relations, Harold replied. We hit them from all three angles. Over the next several days, the group refined their strategy. Frank, with his accounting background, dug deeper into Platinum's financials, identifying potential weaknesses. Gloria activated her network of former banking colleagues to inquire about Platinum's outstanding loans. Diane researched the company's legal history, discovering several pending lawsuits from dissatisfied former dealership owners. Harold, meanwhile, focused on Luxury Motors specifically. He drove past the dealership several times, noting customer traffic patterns and taking photos with his phone. He visited competing dealerships, asking questions about industry trends and local market conditions. He even struck up a conversation with a young salesman at a coffee shop next door to Luxury Motors, gathering inside information about morale and management. The pieces are coming together, Harold told the group during their 4th week of planning. Now we need to start making moves. Their first step was subtle. Harold established an LLC called Winter Solutions, a nod to his last name. Through this company, they began purchasing small blocks of publicly available shares in Platinum Automotive Group. Nothing large enough to trigger reporting requirements, but enough to establish a position. Next, Gloria arranged a meeting with her former colleague who now worked at First Regional Bank, one of Platinum's lenders. We're not asking for confidential information, she assured the banker. We're just curious about the general stability of auto dealer financing in the current market. The banker, happy to reconnect with Gloria, spoke in general terms but confirmed what they suspected. Many dealership groups were struggling with inventory financing, and banks were becoming more cautious about extending credit, particularly those groups that expanded rapidly through acquisitions, he added with a knowing look. Armed with this information, the group moved to phase 2 of their plan. Harold contacted a lawyer who specialized in shareholder rights. The lawyer was initially confused about why a group of retirees was suddenly interested in automotive dealership investments, but Harold's thorough research and clear vision won him over. So you want to know what rights you would have as minority shareholders, the lawyer summarized after their meeting. Exactly, Harold replied, and specifically what leverage those rights might provide in negotiations with the majority owner. The lawyer's advice was invaluable. He outlined several approaches, including the possibility of joining forces with other minority shareholders, like the Thompson family, to create a more powerful voting bloc. In companies that are financially stressed, the lawyer explained, even a relatively small group of organized shareholders can exert significant influence, especially if they're willing to make noise about management practices. By the 6th week of Operation Turnaround, Harold had made contact with Robert Thompson. It wasn't a direct approach, that would have been too obvious. Instead, Harold arranged to attend a local business community breakfast, where he knew Thompson would be present. Harold deliberately sat at Thompson's table and introduced himself, simply as a retired engineer interested in local businesses. He didn't mention his visit to Luxury Motors or his budding investment in platinum. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about the auto industry and listened carefully to Thompson's answers. It must be challenging to manage a dealership in this economic climate, Harold observed. Thompson sighed, his guard lowering slightly. You have no idea, especially when you're part of a larger group with different priorities. I imagine it's quite different from when family-owned businesses could make their own decisions, Harold said gently. Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. My father built Luxury Motors from nothing. 30 years of treating people right, building a reputation. Now, he trailed off, then seemed to remember he was speaking to a stranger. Well, times change. They do indeed, Harold agreed, though sometimes they change back. As they parted, Harold handed Thompson his card, not his new Winter Solutions business card, but his personal one that simply identified him as Harold Winters, professional engineer, retired. If you ever want to talk more about business transitions, I've seen quite a few in my time. Sometimes an outside perspective helps. Thompson tucked the card in his pocket with a polite nod, clearly not expecting to call. That evening, Harold reported back to the group. He's frustrated and demoralized. Exactly what we anticipated. He still cares about the business, but he feels powerless. Perfect, Gloria said. Now we just need to show him there might be another way. The following week brought a significant breakthrough. Through his research, Paul discovered that Platinum had taken out a large short-term loan with a balloon payment coming due in just 2 months. The loan was secured by the assets of several dealerships, including Luxury Motors. If they can't make that payment, they'll be in serious trouble, Paul explained. And their cash flow isn't looking good, Frank added, pointing to the sales figures they'd compiled. Luxury Motors is underperforming compared to similar dealerships in the region. Harold leaned back in his chair, thinking. So if Luxury Motors had an exceptionally bad month or two right when that loan payment comes due, it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Diane finished. But we don't want Luxury Motors to fail, Gloria pointed out. That would hurt the Thompson family too, not to mention the employees. We don't need it to actually fail, Harold clarified. We just need Platinum to worry that it might. Enough to make them willing to negotiate. They spent the rest of the evening outlining the final phase of their plan. It was daring and would require perfect timing, but if it worked, it could give the Thompson family a chance to regain control of their business, with Harold's group as supportive minority partners rather than corporate raiders. As his friends gathered their belongings to leave, Harold felt a familiar mix of excitement and nervousness, the same feeling he'd had before major engineering projects. There were still many variables, many things that could go wrong. Do you think this will actually work? Diane asked quietly as she put on her coat. Harold smiled, thinking of all the complex problems he'd solved during his career. Engineering isn't just about building bridges. It's about understanding systems and how they respond to pressure. Apply the right force in the right place at the right time, and even the largest structures can be moved. And if it doesn't work? She pressed. Harold glanced at Martha's photo on the sideboard. Then we'll have tried. And we'll have shown those young folks at Luxury Motors that they should think twice before dismissing a group of determined senior citizens. His friends laughed, but there was determination in their eyes. Operation Turnaround was moving into its final and most critical phase. Get some rest, Harold told them. Next week we start applying pressure. 6 months had passed since Harold walked out of Luxury Motors humiliated and carless. Half a year of research, planning, and careful financial maneuvers. During that time, he'd celebrated his 79th birthday, jokingly telling his daughter on the phone that he was working on a special project with some friends. It's keeping me busy, he'd said when she asked for details. I'll tell you all about it when it's finished. Now, on a crisp fall morning, Harold stood before his bedroom mirror adjusting his tie, the same dark blue tie he'd worn on his first visit to the dealership. This time, though, he wasn't dressing up to be ignored. He opened his closet and selected his best suit, the one he'd worn to industry award ceremonies and his grandchildren's college graduations. The doorbell rang just as he was putting on his watch, the vintage Omega that Martha had given him for their 30th anniversary. Harold took a final look in the mirror, nodded with satisfaction, and went to answer the door. Lisa Chen stood on his porch, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. As one of the city's most respected corporate attorneys, her time usually cost $500 an hour. Today, she was working for Harold's group at a reduced rate, partly because Gloria had once approved her first home loan, and partly because, as she'd admitted, she found their plan deliciously satisfying. "Ready for the big day, Mr. Winters?" she asked with a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Harold replied, grabbing his briefcase, a genuine leather one that had been a retirement gift from his engineering firm 20 years ago. Lisa drove them to the community center where the rest of the group was waiting. Gloria, Frank, Diane, and Paul were all dressed in their business best. They looked like a corporate board rather than a group of retirees, which was exactly the point. "The documents are all in order," Lisa told them as they gathered around a table. "Winter Solutions LLC now controls 15% of Platinum's shares. Combined with the Thompson family's 30%, we effectively have a very powerful voting bloc." "And Platinum has no idea who's behind Winter Solutions?" Frank asked. Lisa shook her head. "We've maintained corporate anonymity through all the transactions. As far as they know, Winter Solutions could be any investment group." "What about our other leverage points?" Harold asked. "All in place," Paul confirmed. "I've prepared a press packet about Platinum's business practices, ready to send to every automotive industry publication and local news outlet." "But only if necessary," he added. Diane nodded. "And I've spoken with 3 other former dealership owners who had similar experiences with Platinum. They're willing to go public with their stories if needed." Gloria checked her watch. "The bank called this morning. Platinum missed a loan payment deadline yesterday. They've been given a 10-day grace period, but they're officially on the bank's watch list now." Harold took a deep breath. Everything was aligned perfectly. The financial pressure on Platinum was reaching a critical point just as Winter Solutions had secured a significant ownership position. "Then it's time," he said simply. They had debated how many of them should go to the dealership. Too large a group might seem intimidating. Too small might not convey the seriousness of their position. In the end, they decided that Harold and Lisa would go first, with the others on standby to join them if necessary. As Lisa drove them to Luxury Motors, Harold felt strangely calm. 6 months ago, he'd arrived as a customer eager to fulfill a lifelong dream. Today, he arrived as something entirely different. The dealership looked much the same, though Harold noticed fewer cars on the lot, a sign of the inventory financing issues they'd identified. As they walked through the front doors, Harold recognized the same salespeople who had ignored him before. They paid no attention to him now either, their eyes going immediately to Lisa in her expensive suit and designer glasses. A young salesman approached them quickly. "Welcome to Luxury Motors. How can I help you today?" "We're here to see Robert Thompson," Lisa said crisply. "Harold Winters and Lisa Chen. We don't have an appointment, but he'll want to speak with us." The salesman looked uncertain. "Mr. Thompson is quite busy today. Perhaps I could help you instead?" Harold smiled politely. "Please tell him Harold Winters is here regarding Winter Solutions LLC and Platinum Automotive Group's financing situation." The salesman's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Platinum. "Oh, let me see if he's available," he stammered, hurrying toward a back office. 5 minutes later, Robert Thompson himself emerged, looking confused but professionally courteous. He showed no sign of recognizing Harold from either their previous brief encounter at the dealership or their conversation at the business breakfast. "Mr. Winters, Ms. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "How can I help you today? Is there somewhere we could speak privately?" Lisa asked, her tone making it clear this wasn't a casual visit. Thompson led them to his office, a space that seemed too small for a man whose family had once owned the entire dealership. The walls held photos of the business through the years, including several showing a younger Thompson standing beside an older man Harold presumed was his father. Once they were seated, Lisa placed a folder on Thompson's desk. "Mr. Thompson, we represent Winter Solutions LLC, which has recently acquired a significant interest in Platinum Automotive Group." Thompson's expression changed from confusion to wariness. "I see. And what does that have to do with me or this dealership?" "Winter Solutions is particularly interested in Luxury Motors," Harold said calmly. "We believe it's being mismanaged under Platinum's ownership, and we're concerned about the impact on its long-term viability." Thompson sat up straighter. "I assure you, despite challenging market conditions, we're doing everything possible to—" "Your sales are down 37% compared to last year." Harold interrupted gently. Your customer satisfaction scores have fallen to the lowest in the region, and your inventory turnover rate suggests serious issues with your selection and pricing strategy. Thompson's mouth opened, then closed. How do you know all this? Lisa slid a document across the desk. This is a summary of our findings. As you'll see, we've done quite thorough research. As Thompson flipped through the pages, his face grew increasingly pale. The document detailed not just Luxury Motors' performance issues, but also Platinum's precarious financial situation, including the missed loan payment and upcoming debt obligations. What exactly do you want? Thompson asked finally, his voice tense. We want to discuss the future of Luxury Motors, Harold said, specifically a future that might involve returning control to the Thompson family, with Winter Solutions as a supportive partner rather than Platinum as an extractive owner. Thompson stared at Harold, recognition finally dawning. Wait, you were here before. About 6 months ago. You wanted to test drive the blue coupe. Harold nodded. I came in ready to buy, cash in hand, but your salespeople decided I wasn't worth their time. I didn't realize, Thompson began. No, you didn't, Harold agreed. You saw an old man and assumed he wasn't valuable. That's the same mistake Platinum made with you, isn't it? They saw a family business and didn't value what made it special. The relationships, the reputation, the community connection. Thompson's shoulders slumped. My father built this place from nothing. When Platinum came in, they promised to maintain our approach, our values. But all they cared about was short-term profits. They cut our service department, pushed us to focus on high-margin vehicles nobody wanted. He trailed off, looking at the photos on the wall. Now I'm just a manager in my own family's business, watching it fall apart. Lisa cleared her throat. Mr. Thompson, Winter Solutions currently controls 15% of Platinum's shares. Combined with your family's 30%, we would have a very powerful position, potentially enough to force significant changes in how Platinum manages this dealership. Thompson looked up sharply. My family's shares are non-voting. That was part of the deal with Platinum. Actually, Lisa said, sliding another document across the desk, our review of the acquisition agreement suggests that clause is only valid as long as Platinum meets certain performance metrics. Metrics they've failed to achieve for the past 3 quarters. Harold watched as Thompson quickly scanned the document, his expression changing from disbelief to cautious hope. If this is correct, Thompson said slowly, and if we combine our shares, we could demand changes, Harold finished. Or, in the right circumstances, even force Platinum to sell back controlling interest in Luxury Motors. Why would you do this? Thompson asked, looking directly at Harold. If this is about the car, I can arrange. Harold shook his head. This isn't about the car anymore. It's about respect. It's about not discounting people based on their age or appearance. And it's about saving a business that matters to this community. Thompson was quiet for a moment, studying Harold with new eyes. You didn't just happen to buy those shares, did you? You targeted Platinum specifically because of what happened here. Harold smiled slightly. Let's just say my friends and I have been very focused these past 6 months. Your friends? Lisa nodded. Mr. Winters represents a group of investors, all experienced professionals who recognized an opportunity. Thompson looked back at the documents, then at the photos of his father. When he spoke again, his voice was different, stronger, more determined. What's the next step? Harold leaned forward. We'd like you to join us for a meeting. Today, if possible. My colleagues are waiting at the community center. We have a proposal for how to move forward, together. For the first time since they'd entered his office, Thompson smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. Let me get my coat. 1 year later, Harold pulled into the Luxury Motors parking lot in his midnight blue coupe. The car still gave him a thrill every time he drove it. Not just because of how it handled on the winding coastal road, but because of everything it represented. The dealership looked different now. The flashy, oversized signs promoting zero-down financing and unbelievable deals were gone, replaced by elegant, understated branding. The windows weren't plastered with neon sale announcements. Instead, they showcased the cars themselves, beautifully lit and displayed. Harold smiled as he noticed the new tagline beneath the Luxury Motors name. Family-owned for over 35 years. Respect, integrity, service. Inside, the changes were even more apparent. The showroom had been redesigned with comfortable seating areas where customers could discuss their needs without pressure. The wall behind the reception desk displayed photos from the dealership's history, including a black and white image of Bill Thompson standing in front of the original location in 1990. "Morning, Mr. Winters," called Amy from the reception desk. She was in her 20s, but always treated the older customers with the same respect she showed everyone else. That was part of the new training program Harold had helped develop. "Good morning, Amy. Is Robert in yet?" "He's in the conference room with the new hires. Said to send you back when you arrived." Harold made his way through the showroom, nodding to several salespeople who greeted him by name. He no longer needed to wait for attention here. The conference room door was open. Inside, Robert Thompson stood before a group of 6 people, 3 men and 3 women of various ages, all dressed professionally and listening attentively. "The most important thing to remember," Robert was saying, "is that you never know who's walking through that door. The person in jeans and a t-shirt might be a tech millionaire. The elderly gentleman in a dated suit might have cash in his pocket for our most expensive model. Every customer deserves the same respect, the same attention, the same honest service." He looked up and spotted Harold. "And speaking of respect," he said with a smile, "I'd like you to meet someone who taught me a valuable lesson about assumptions. This is Harold Winters, our board advisor and one of the partners who helped us reclaim this dealership." The trainees turned, and Harold gave them a friendly wave. "Don't let me interrupt. I can wait until you're finished." "We're just wrapping up," Robert said. "I was about to show them our customer service scores from last quarter. Highest in the region," he added with undisguised pride. Harold took a seat as Robert continued the orientation. The partnership between Winter Solutions and the Thompson family had transformed luxury motors. 6 months of negotiation, legal maneuvering, and carefully applied pressure had finally convinced Platinum to sell back controlling interest in the dealership. Harold's group retained a 20% stake, while the Thompson family once again held the majority. The change in ownership had been just the beginning. Together, they'd rebuilt the business culture from the ground up. The high-pressure sales tactics were gone, replaced by a consultative approach focused on matching customers with the right vehicle for their needs. The service department, which Platinum had gutted, was restored and expanded. Former customers who had been driven away by Platinum's policies were personally invited to return. Robert dismissed the trainees, and they filed out, each stopping to shake Harold's hand on the way. When they were alone, Robert collapsed into a chair with a grin. 300% increase in customer retention, he said. Dad would be proud. Harold nodded. Bill Thompson had passed away shortly before the ownership transition was complete. But he'd lived long enough to know his son was taking back the family business. "How's the community outreach program coming along?" Harold asked. "Better than expected. The senior driving refresher courses are fully booked for the next 2 months. And the technical school partnership has already placed 3 graduates in our service department." The outreach program had been Harold's idea, a way to connect with segments of the community that traditional dealerships often ignored. The driving courses for seniors were particularly popular, offering older drivers a chance to update their skills and learn about new automotive technology in a respectful, supportive environment. "And the business numbers?" Harold asked, though he already knew the answer from the monthly reports. Robert's grin widened. "Revenue is up 22% year over year. Expenses are down 15% without cutting any corners. Turns out treating people right is actually good business." "Who would have thought?" Harold said dryly. They both laughed, then Robert checked his watch. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Gloria already called to say they're on their way." The board of luxury motors now included Harold, Gloria, and Frank from the original investment group, along with Robert and his sister Jennifer, who had moved back from out of state to help run the family business. "Before they get here," Robert said, his tone growing serious, "I wanted to thank you again, not just for the business part, but for the wake-up call. I'd become so beaten down working under Platinum that I'd started treating customers the same way they treated me, like numbers, not people." Harold nodded. "Sometimes we all need reminding of what matters." The board meeting was productive and mercifully brief. They reviewed the quarterly performance, approved the budget for the upcoming holiday promotion, and discussed a potential expansion of the certified pre-owned program. As they were wrapping up, Jennifer Thompson brought up the last agenda item. The Regional Auto Dealers Association has asked us to host their annual charity gala next month. They specifically mentioned our remarkable turnaround as an inspiration to other dealerships. We should do it, Gloria said. Good publicity and good karma. Everyone agreed, and with that the meeting adjourned. As the others gathered their things, Robert pulled Harold aside. I almost forgot, he said. That car you were interested in originally? The one we wouldn't let you test drive? You mean the one sitting in my garage? Harold replied with a smile. Yes, that one. The manufacturer just announced a new performance package for next year's model. I've put you on the list to get the first one that comes in. No obligation, of course, but I thought you might want first refusal. I appreciate that, Harold said. Let me know when it arrives. After saying goodbye to his fellow board members, Harold drove to his usual lunch spot, a small cafe with outdoor seating overlooking the harbor. He ordered his usual sandwich and watched the boats while he waited. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter. How's the car business, Dad? Still enjoying your retirement? Harold smiled and typed back, yeah, never better. Tell the grandkids I'll take them for a ride in the new model when they visit next month. A young couple with a baby took the table next to his. The man was trying to manage the stroller while the woman settled the fussing infant. Harold stood and moved his chair to give them more space. Thank you, the woman said gratefully. We're still figuring out how to go anywhere with all this baby equipment. You'll get the hang of it, Harold assured her. I remember those days. It gets easier. They chatted briefly about children and grandchildren. When Harold mentioned he was on the board of Luxury Motors, the man perked up. We've been thinking about trading in for something more family-friendly. I've heard good things about that place recently, that they're honest and don't use pressure tactics. I'd be happy to introduce you to someone there when you're ready, Harold offered, handing them his card. After lunch, Harold drove to the community center for his weekly investment club meeting. He was giving a presentation today on corporate governance and shareholder activism. Several new members had joined after hearing about the group's success with Luxury Motors. As he set up his laptop and waited for everyone to arrive, Harold thought about how much his life had changed in the past year and a half. What had started as a simple desire to buy a car had transformed into an unexpected second career and a whole new sense of purpose. Gloria arrived early to help with the projector setup. Quite a crowd today, she remarked, looking at the packed room. Your fan club is growing. They're here for the free coffee, not for me, Harold joked. Don't sell yourself short, she said. People respect what you accomplished. You didn't just get mad when that dealership dismissed you. You changed the whole business. Harold thought about Martha, about the card she'd written encouraging him to get his dream car. He hadn't just gotten the car. He'd found something he hadn't realized he was missing. A challenge, a purpose, a way to make a difference. All right, everyone, he said as the meeting came to order. Today we're going to talk about how a group of determined retirees can change a business for the better. It starts with remembering that your age doesn't determine your value, and it's never too late to turn the tables. As the group laughed appreciatively, Harold looked out at their eager faces and smiled. The best part of this unexpected journey wasn't the car or even the business success. It was the reminder that he still had so much to contribute, so much life left to live, and that was worth more than any luxury vehicle.